What if I told you there are weapons so catastrophic, so fundamentally wrong, that their very existence threatens to unravel the fabric of reality itself? In the grim darkness of the far future, humanity has mastered death in 1,000 forms. Plasma that burns hotter than suns, bolters that turn flesh into mist, virus bombs that reduce entire worlds to lifeless husks in hours. But these are mere children's toys compared to what we're about to discuss. Because in the 41st millennium, there exist instruments of destruction so absolute, so profoundly dangerous, that even the Imperium of man, a civilization that has weaponized fanaticism itself, keeps them locked away in vaults surrounded by prayers and wards, and the corpses of anyone foolish enough to look too closely. The archives speak of them only in whispers. The Inquisition has executed entire bloodlines for merely knowing their names. And yet, they exist, waiting, breathing, hungering. Picture this: a sealed chamber floating in the void between stars, older than the Imperium itself. No coordinates mark its location. No astropathic signal reaches it. Inside, suspended in fields of force that would atomize a battle cruiser, rests an object no larger than a human fist. It pulses with a light that shouldn't exist, colors that have no name in any human tongue. Space itself bends around it, warping, screaming silently. Time moves differently, their seconds stretch into hours. Hours collapse into moments. And if you could somehow survive long enough to touch it, to activate it, you would unleash something that makes orbital bombardment look like a gentle rain. This is a chronophage, a weapon from the dark age of technology, an era when humanity's hubris exceeded even its current grotesque magnificence. The men and women who built it understood physics in ways we've forgotten, in ways the Mechanicus would sell their remaining organic parts to remember. They didn't just split atoms or manipulate gravity. They broke time itself and fashioned the pieces into a weapon. When a chronophage activates, it doesn't explode. It erases, not just matter that would be too simple, too merciful. It erases moments. Entire stretches of causality simply cease to have ever existed. Planets don't die. They retroactively never were. Stars blink out, and the light they cast for millions of years vanishes from the galaxy as if it had been a lie all along. Civilizations don't fall. They're deleted from the timeline, their histories becoming less than dust, less than memory. They become nothing in the most literal sense that physics and metaphysics can conjure. The Imperium has used one exactly twice in its 10,000-year history. Both times, the Inquisitor who gave the order immediately took their own life afterward. Both times, entire sectors of space reported strange dreams for decades. Dreams of worlds that should exist but don't. Of friends they never had. Of histories that feel real but lead nowhere. But temporal annihilation? That's just the beginning. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, in foundries so ancient they make the mountains above seem like infant constructions, the Mechanicus guards something they refuse to name. Even in their endless data logs and scrolls of forbidden knowledge, it appears only as a string of binary code that translates to nothing in any language. The tech priests who maintain the seals around it undergo memory wipes every 6 hours. They never remember what they're guarding. They only know they must guard it, or something worse than death, worse than the obliteration of their forged world, worse than the fury of the Omnissiah himself, will be unleashed. Rumors say it's a piece of technology so complete, so perfect in its design, that reality itself recoils from it. A violation of the laws that govern existence, not through brute force, but through precision. An elegant equation that, when solved, proves that the universe should not be, and in proving this, makes it so. Others whisper of the breath of the gods, a weapon the Emperor himself supposedly sealed away during the Great Crusade after seeing what it could do. They say it doesn't destroy matter or energy or time, it destroys concepts. Entire ideas can be wiped from existence. Imagine a weapon that doesn't kill your enemies. It erases the very concept of your enemies ever having existed as a category of being. Imagine removing war itself from the tapestry of reality. Not just ending conflicts, but making it impossible for conscious minds to even conceive of violence. Sounds noble, doesn't it? Until you realize that evolution itself is a form of conflict, and without it, life becomes a static painting, beautiful and utterly dead. The breath was never used. It was built by one of the lost Primarchs, according to legends so forbidden that even thinking them too loudly can attract inquisitorial attention. After the Emperor saw its demonstration on an uninhabited moon, a moon that still exists, but that no instrument can detect, a moon that is real and unreal simultaneously, he ordered it sealed. He ordered every schematic destroyed. Every scientist who worked on it was mind-wiped and sent to penal legions on the eastern fringe. The Primarch who created it, their existence was redacted from history with the same thoroughness the weapon itself employed. But here's what keeps the High Lords of Terra awake during their meditation cycles. They know these weapons exist. They know approximately where some of them are. What terrifies them is the question of what they don't know. What if there are others? What if, scattered across the galaxy in the ruins of human colonies from the Dark Age, there are devices that make even these seem tame? What if some have already been activated and we're living in the aftershock, in a reality that's already been compromised, already been rewritten, and we lack the context to even recognize the scars? The galaxy is vast, incomprehensibly so. Millions of worlds, billions of ruins, trillions of lost artifacts from ages of power we can barely imagine. And somewhere out there, in a tomb on a dead world or floating in the wreckage of a space hulk drifting through the warp, there might be something worse. Something that doesn't just destroy reality but replaces it with something else entirely. Something alien. Something wrong. The Necrons know about such things. They're Catan masters, star gods who fed on suns and played with the fundamental forces of the universe like children with toys. Created weapons that make nuclear fire look like a candle flame. The Ionic Orb doesn't just kill it on births. It reaches backward through your timeline and ensures you were never born, that your parents never met, that your species never evolved. The breath of the gods at least had the mercy to be quick. The Ionic Orb is thorough, methodical, absolute. And then there's what the Eldar won't discuss. In the depths of the Black Library, protected by wards that make the Emperor's own palace defenses look primitive, there supposedly exists a compilation of techniques and technologies the ancient Eldar developed at the height of their power. Not weapons in the traditional sense, but methodologies. Ways of thinking that, when applied correctly, can reshape the underlying code of existence itself. The Eldar sealed them away, not because they were afraid of other races finding them, but because they were terrified of what they'd already done with them, of what they'd already set in motion during their empire's decadent final days. Some scholars believe this is what really birthed Slaanesh. Not just the psychic excess of a billion souls drowning in hedonism, but something deeper. An intentional or accidental activation of something that was never meant to be activated. A weapon that misfired not across space, but across the boundary between material and immaterial, creating a god not of worship but of pure conceptual violation. If that's true, then Slaanesh itself is a weapon. One that continues to fire, continues to wound reality, continues to spread like a cancer through the warp. And if a weapon created a chaos god accidentally, what could a weapon designed to create chaos gods do on purpose? The Inquisition has a secret protocol. It's known only to the highest echelons, to those who bear the seal of obliteration. If reality itself begins to unravel, if the weapons we've discussed start to proliferate, if the seals begin to fail, there is one final option. One last weapon that makes all others pale in comparison. But even speaking its name is said to draw its attention. And you never, ever want its attention. They call it the Terminus Decree. 3 words written on parchment made from the skin of a saint, sealed with wax mixed with the Emperor's own blood, or so the legend claims. It rests beneath the Imperial Palace on Terra, in a vault that exists in 5 dimensions simultaneously, guarded by mechanisms that would take 1,000 years to describe. The custodians who watch over it are selected from birth, raised in absolute isolation, taught nothing but their purpose. They live their entire lives knowing only that they must guard something without ever learning what it is. When they die, their souls are bound to the vault, adding another layer of protection, another scream of warning to any who would dare approach. The Terminus Decree is not a weapon you aim at an enemy. It's a weapon you aim at everything. Some say it's a final command from the Emperor himself. Instructions written in his last moments of consciousness before the Golden Throne imprisoned him in his eternal half-death. Instructions on how to restart the Imperium, or perhaps how to end it mercifully rather than let it suffer. Others believe it's something far worse, a way to unmake the Emperor's bargain, to undo the deal he struck on Moloch with the Chaos Gods themselves, to rewrite that moment of cosmic treason, and in doing so, collapse the entire timeline that followed. 10,000 years of suffering, triumph, sacrifice, and glory simply erased, returned to the quantum foam of possibility. But imagine being the one who has to make that choice. Imagine standing before that vault, the galaxy burning around you, chaos spilling through tears in reality, the Necrons awakening in their billions, the Tyranids blotting out entire sectors, and knowing you hold the key. Knowing that inside that vault is a way to make it all stop, but also knowing you'll never see what comes after, if anything comes after at all. Would you open it? Could you? The Inquisitor Kryptman faced a similar choice once, though his weapon was far less absolute. When the Tyranids of Hive Fleet Leviathan threatened to devour the eastern quadrant of the galaxy, he made a decision that haunts the Imperium still. He used a weapon called Exterminatus not once, not on a single world, but systematically, dozens of planets. He burned them himself, scoured them of all life, created a buffer zone of dead worlds so vast that even the Tyranids' hunger couldn't bridge it. He saved trillions by sacrificing billions. And for this act of calculated genocide, this mathematics of atrocity, he was declared excommunicate traitorous and hunted across the stars. But here's what they don't tell you in the official records. What's hidden in data vaults even the Inquisition pretends don't exist. Kryptman didn't just use conventional exterminatus weapons. On 3 of those worlds, he deployed something else. Something he'd found in the ruins of a Dark Age installation on a world called Prometheus Ix. The records describe the weapon only as the Unmaker, and what it did to those 3 worlds defies coherent description. Ships that approach the dead zones report instruments going haywire, crewmen experiencing memories of lives they never lived, perceiving angles that mathematics says cannot exist. The worlds are there, gravitational sensors confirm their mass, but telescopes show nothing. Space stations report different numbers of moons orbiting them depending on what day of the week you check. Reality itself has become unstable there, corrupted, infected with a kind of metaphysical gangrene. Kryptman stopped the Tyranids, but he may have created something worse. Imagine a spreading zone where the laws of physics are negotiable, where cause and effect become suggestions rather than rules. Imagine that spreading, slowly, inexorably, like a stain on reality itself. The Imperium classified those sectors as forbidden zones and pretends they don't exist. But the navigators who guide ships through the warp can feel them, can sense the wrongness spreading through space-time like cracks in ice. They have nightmares about what happens when those cracks meet, when the zones of unreality merge and begin to grow exponentially. And Kryptman? He's still out there somewhere, hunted by his former brothers, carrying the knowledge of where he found the Unmaker, carrying the horrible understanding that there might be more of them, that Prometheus 9 might have been a weapons depot, not an isolated laboratory, that somewhere in the galaxy there could be warehouses full of devices designed to make reality optional. The Mechanicus knows more than they admit. Of course they do. 10,000 years of excavating the ruins of mankind's greatest age has taught them many things, including when to stop learning. There's a rank within the priesthood of Mars that doesn't officially exist, the Deletary. Tech priests whose sole purpose is to find Dark Age technology and destroy it. Not study it, not archive it, not attempt to understand it, destroy it absolutely. They're equipped with weapons designed specifically to unmake other weapons, to ensure that not even subatomic traces remain. They operate in cells of 3, and when their mission is complete, 2 of them execute the third, chosen randomly. Then one of the survivors executes the other. The last one performs the rite of forgetting, a noospheric cascade that wipes their own memory, leaving them with nothing but the knowledge that they succeeded. This is how seriously the Mechanicus take certain discoveries. And yet, despite these measures, despite 10 millennia of careful culling, they estimate that over 70% of Dark Age weapons caches remain undiscovered. 70%. Think about that. Everything we've discussed, the chronophages, the reality warping devices, the conceptual erasers, all of that represents less than a third of what's actually out there. The rest lies waiting in the dark places of the galaxy, in ruins swallowed by time, in derelict ships drifting between stars, in sealed vaults on worlds whose names have been forgotten for 5,000 years. Some have already been found by those who don't understand what they're holding. There's a report from the Damocles Gulf, censored so heavily that only 3 words remain legible: children, activation, and why. An entire subsector went dark after those words were transmitted. No warp signatures, no astropathic signals, nothing. When the Navy finally sent a battle group to investigate 2 years later, they found the stars still shining, the planet still orbiting, but every sign of human habitation was gone. Not destroyed, erased. Buildings stood empty, but perfectly preserved. Cities full of clothes and furniture and food rotting on tables, but no bodies, no bones, no biological traces whatsoever. Genetic scanners found no evidence that humans had ever existed there. And yet the buildings remained, the infrastructure, the very civilization they'd built. As if someone had carefully deleted every human from the equation while leaving everything else perfectly intact. The battle group's commander reported strange behavior among her crew after spending just 3 days in the system. Sailors claiming they could remember people who weren't in any personnel records. Engineers reporting childhood memories of being raised on ships they'd never served on. The astropath began screaming about the hollow places where souls should be, and had to be sedated. The commander ordered an immediate withdrawal and recommended the entire sector be placed under quarantine extremis. The recommendation was approved within an hour, a speed that suggests the High Lords knew exactly what they were dealing with, and were terrified it might spread. But here's the question that haunts me, that should haunt anyone who knows these stories. What if that wasn't a malfunction? What if that weapon worked exactly as designed? What if during the Dark Age, humanity had reached such heights of arrogance that they created weapons to fight wars, not against other species or even other humans, but against the very concept of their enemies? Imagine wanting to defeat your rivals so completely that you don't just kill them, you remove them from history. You unwrite them from reality, but you keep all their stuff. A perfect conquest, a total victory. Genocide made so complete that even the word genocide becomes inadequate because nothing was ever murdered. It simply never existed in the first place. The Emperor knew about these weapons. He had to have known. During the Great Crusade, he reunited a galaxy's worth of scattered human worlds, and in doing so, he must have encountered the ruins, the caches, the sealed vaults. The question that divides the Inquisition's highest circles is simple. Did he destroy what he found, or did he hide it? And if he hid it, where? And for what purpose? Some believe this is the real reason he built the Imperial Webway project. Not just to free humanity from warp travel, but to create a space where he could store these weapons safely, separated from real space by layers of reality itself. A cosmic vault where even chaos couldn't reach, where the most dangerous artifacts of human achievement could sleep forever, guarded by golden warriors who never question and never tire. But the project failed. Magnus broke it. The demons poured in. And if those weapons were stored there, if they were waiting in the sections of the webway that the Emperor sealed off in his desperate last-ditch defense, then they're sitting now in tunnels where reality and unreality mix freely, where demons walk and the laws of physics are written in crayon by mad gods? What if a demon found one? What if chaos, in its eternal random searching through the fragments of broken dimensions, stumbled across a chronophage or an unmaker or something worse? What if the reason the warp has become so unstable recently, the reason the Great Rift tore across the galaxy, isn't just Abaddon's ambition or chaos reaching a critical mass of power? What if it's because something in the webway activated something it shouldn't have, and reality itself is now responding to a fundamental corruption at its core? The silent king of the Necrons returned from his self-imposed exile in the void beyond the galaxy with a warning. His people, ancient beyond reckoning, masters of technology that makes even the Dark Age look primitive, abandoned their goal of reconquering the galaxy almost immediately upon his return. Why? What did he see out there in the darkness between galaxies that made him come racing back? What did he learn that made him willing to negotiate with the species his people once considered cattle? There are weapons out there, he supposedly told the Eldar Farseer he met in secret, a meeting that broke 10,000 years of absolute hostility between their races. Weapons that make the war in heaven look like a border skirmish. His people built them, the old ones built them. And when gods and ancient races go to war, they don't settle for mere destruction. They compete. They escalate. And somewhere in that escalation, someone built something that should never have been built. Something that ended the war in heaven, not through victory, but through mutual horror. Something both sides immediately agreed to seal away and never speak of again. But 60 million years is a long time. Seals erode. Warnings fade. Successors forget why the rules were made, only that they exist. And now, in the dying light of the 41st millennium, with every faction in the galaxy tearing at each other in desperate fury, those seals are failing. The ancient compacts are breaking, and somewhere, something is waking up. Something that was never meant to wake. Something that might make us wish the Tyranids had simply eaten everything, because at least then the universe would still make sense, would still follow rules, would still have a fundamental logic to its existence. On a shrine world called Ophelia the Seventh, a sister of battle named Celestine experienced a vision that she reported to her superiors before taking a vow of silence. In her vision, she stood before the golden throne and watched as the Emperor opened his eyes, truly opened them. Not the flickering psychic awareness he maintains, but actual, physical consciousness. And he spoke one word, just one, before his eyes closed again. The word made every candle in the shrine simultaneously extinguish, made every skull in the reliquary weep blood, made the very stones of the cathedral groan as if in pain. The word was sorry. The Inquisition sealed the report. They didn't just classify it or restrict access. They performed the rite of obliteration on every physical copy and executed a virus through the noosphere that corrupted every digital record. The 3 inquisitors who read it before the sealing took place all resigned their positions within a month. One joined the Adeptus Sororitas as a simple battle sister, refusing to speak for the rest of her life. Another walked into the wastelands of a death world and was never seen again. The third wrote a single sentence in his journal before drinking hemlock. "We are the weapon, and we have already fired." What did he mean? The question consumed the remaining inquisitors who knew even fragments of the story. Was he suggesting that humanity itself, in its current form, represents some kind of weapon? That we're the payload of something launched during the Dark Age, and we simply haven't detonated yet? It sounds absurd until you consider what we've become. A species so violent, so faithfully devoted to an emperor who may or may not still be conscious, that our collective psychic impression in the warp has begun to calcify into something almost godlike. A species that breeds so prolifically, spreads so aggressively, fights so relentlessly that even the Tyranids, a force literally designed to consume galaxies, struggle against us. What if that's not natural? What if, somewhere in the genetic engineering projects of the Dark Age, some scientists decided that the best weapon against an unknown future wasn't a bomb or a reality warping device, but a species? A humanity tweaked just enough to become eternally, magnificently, catastrophically militant. A humanity that would fight anything, believe anything, sacrifice anything for survival. A humanity that, if it ever encountered something truly existential, would throw itself at the problem with such furious totality that either the threat would break or we would. But either way, the weapon would have served its purpose. The evidence is circumstantial but disturbing. Janitors who study pre-Unity human remains note subtle differences in the baseline genome. Nothing dramatic, nothing you'd notice in a single generation or even 100 generations, but over millennia, the changes compound. Modern humans are more aggressive than our ancient ancestors, more resistant to psychological trauma, more capable of functioning in states of perpetual warfare that should, by all rights, cause complete societal collapse. We're not different enough to be called a subspecies, but we're different enough that a Dark Age geneticist wouldn't recognize us as purely natural evolution. The Emperor knew. Of course he knew. A being of his intellect, his genetic mastery, would have seen the modifications immediately. And rather than reverse them, he amplified them. The Thunder Warriors, the Space Marines, the Primarchs, each iteration pushed humanity's weaponized qualities further, refined them, perfected them. He didn't create these warriors despite humanity's violent nature. He created them because of it, taking what was already there and magnifying it to godhood. But here's the terrifying implication. If we're a weapon, who fired us? Who or what decided that the solution to some unknown problem was to create a species like us and set us loose on the galaxy? And more importantly, are we even aimed at the right target, or are we just firing blindly, hoping we hit whatever we were meant to hit before we burn ourselves out completely? There's a chamber on Mars that even the Fabricator General refuses to enter. It's marked on no map, accessible through a series of tunnels that exist in a constant state of quantum uncertainty. Walk through them and you might emerge seconds later or centuries in the future, the passages themselves seemingly unable to decide when they exist. The few tech priests who've survived the journey describe the chamber as small, barely 10 meters across, containing a single pedestal. On the pedestal rests what looks like a human skull, but the proportions are wrong. The bone density is too high, and it radiates a psychic signature that makes even blanks feel nauseous. Etched into the skull in letters too small to read without magnification is a message in a language that predates Old Night. It took the Mechanicus 3000 years to translate just the first line. Here lies the architect of necessity. Forgive us for what we became to survive what we knew was coming. The rest remains untranslated, but linguistic analysis suggests the message is over 10,000 words long. 10,000 words carved into a single skull in letters smaller than bacteria. The precision required would exceed even the Mechanicus's current capabilities. And the message's first line raises a question so profound that the tech priests who discovered it immediately sought memory wipe. Survive what? What did they know was coming? What was so terrible that it required turning humanity into a living weapon? That required the Emperor? That required 10,000 years of the bloodiest regime imaginable just to maintain what they'd started? Some believe the answer lies with the Tyranids, that the Dark Age humans somehow detected them coming, saw them in the void between galaxies, and realized that the only way to survive would be to make ourselves so toxic, so difficult to consume, so violently poisonous that even the Great Devourer would choke on us. We're not trying to defeat the Tyranids, we're trying to give them indigestion so bad they move on to easier prey. Every war we fight, every atrocity we commit, every time we salt our own earth and burn our own worlds rather than let them fall, we're making ourselves less palatable, less worth the biomass we'd provide. But others whisper of something worse. They point to the Astronomicon, to the way it's grown stronger over the millennia, even as the Emperor's body fails. They note how its light has become essential to navigation, how the Imperium literally cannot function without it, how we've structured our entire civilization around this single point of light shining in the warp. And they ask, what if that's not a lighthouse? What if it's a beacon? What if we've spent 10,000 years broadcasting our location to something out there in the dark, calling it home, drawing it closer with every soul sacrificed to keep the Astronomicon burning? What if the weapon isn't meant to protect us? What if we're the bait? On the eastern fringe, entire patrol fleets have begun reporting impossible sensor readings. Not Tyranids, not chaos, not any known threat, just absence. Regions of space where reality seems to thin, where stars flicker in and out of existence, where time itself becomes unreliable. Ships entering these zones sometimes return instantly, sometimes not for decades, and the crews can never agree on how long they were gone. Some ships return before they left, their crews encountering themselves at the edge of the anomaly, both versions claiming to be the original. The navigators are terrified. Their sight, which peers through the warp to guide vessels, shows them something in those zones that they refuse to describe. When pressed, when ordered by inquisitorial authority to report what they've seen, they simply repeat the same phrase: "It's already here. It was always here. We built our house on its grave, and now it's waking up underneath us." One navigator, before she tore out her own warp eye and threw herself into the void, managed to sketch what she'd seen. The image made no sense: geometric shapes that hurt to look at, angles that folded through dimensions that shouldn't exist, and at the center, something that might have been a doorway or might have been a mouth. Beneath the sketch, she'd written in her own blood, "This is what the weapons were for, not to create, to seal, and we broke the seal when we broke the webway." The implication struck like a thunder hammer. The Emperor's great work, the Imperial Webway Project, wasn't just about freeing humanity from warp travel. It wasn't just about denying chaos its hold on mankind. It was about maintaining a seal, a cosmic lock that kept something imprisoned. Something that had been locked away since the war in heaven, since gods and ancient races fought wars that made reality itself scream. The webway wasn't empty when mankind found it. It was a prison. A cage built by the old ones, or the Catan or something older still, designed to hold something that couldn't be killed, couldn't be destroyed, could only be contained. And Magnus broke it. In his arrogance, in his certainty that he knew better than his father, he shattered the seals. Not all of them, not immediately, but enough. Enough to create cracks. Enough to let the prisoner start to wake, to test its bonds, to remember that it had once been free and that freedom was delicious. The custodians guard the Imperial Palace, standing eternal watch over the Emperor and the broken webway portal. But they've begun to report something strange. In the depths of the webway, beyond the walls they've erected, beyond the psychic barriers the Emperor maintains even in his half-death, they hear something. Not demons, they know what demons sound like, have fought them for 10,000 years. This is different. It sounds like breathing. Like something massive, something ancient, something patient beyond comprehension. Slowly inhaling and exhaling, getting stronger with each breath. The Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes hasn't left the throne room in 300 years. He stands before the golden throne, watching his master's withered form, and every day he asks the same question: is it time? And every day, through methods known only to the custodians, the Emperor gives the same answer: not yet, but soon. What are they waiting for? What threshold must be crossed before whatever protocol they're following can be enacted? And most terrifyingly, what happens to the rest of us when that moment comes? The weapons we've discussed, the Chronophages, the Unmakers, the reality warping devices, the Terminus Decree itself, what if they were never meant for external threats? What if every weapon the Dark Age created, every reality-breaking device the Emperor sealed away, every tool of cosmic destruction the Imperium guards so jealously, was designed for a single purpose? Not to fight the Tyranids or Chaos or the Necrons, but to fight something else. Something that makes all those threats look like preliminary rounds, warm-up exercises before the main event. The ancient races knew. The Eldar won't speak of it, but their Farseers have begun to see the same visions, the same impossible futures. The Necrons, who've slept for 60 million years, are awakening ahead of schedule, rushing to consciousness as something has alarmed them. Even the orcs, brutal and simple as they are, have started migrating away from certain sectors, their genetic memory deeper and older than any history, telling them to flee from something they can't name. And in the heart of the warp, the chaos gods themselves have grown quiet. The great game continues, they still war against each other and corrupt reality. But something has changed. There are moments now, brief interludes where all four of them stop, where they look toward the same point in space-time, toward the same thing, and for just an instant, they feel something they haven't felt in eons, fear, because even gods can be prey. Even chaos itself can be threatened. And if something exists that makes the chaos gods afraid, then what hope do we have? What hope has humanity ever had? The answer comes from an unexpected source. A young adept working in the archives of Terra, processing documents so old they crumble at a touch, finds a fragment of a letter. It's written in High Gothic, but in a dialect so ancient, it takes her weeks to parse. The letter is addressed to someone called the Last Scientist and contains a single paragraph that survived the millennia intact. You asked what we should do if the seals fail, if our descendants prove unworthy of the burden we've placed on them. My answer is simple. We trust in what we made them to be. Not weapons to wield, but weapons that wield themselves. Every war they fight, every drop of blood they spill, every prayer they offer to gods they've invented, strengthens the seal. They are not the key that locks the door, they are the door. And as long as they endure, as long as they suffer and survive and refuse to surrender, the prisoner stays contained. Our children may curse us for making them this way, may hate the destiny we've woven into their genes, but they will endure because that's what we designed them to do. They will last until the heat death of the universe if necessary, an eternal vigil disguised as a civilization, never knowing they're guards in a prison so vast it encompasses their entire existence. The young adept drops the fragment, her hands shaking. Because if this is true, if humanity's entire existence is just an elaborate lock, then what happens when we finally break? The question echoes through every level of the Imperium now, a whisper that spreads like a virus through the most secure channels, the most encrypted transmissions, the most sacred confessionals. From the cardinals of the ecclesiarchy to the fabricator general of Mars, from the chapter masters of Space Marine chapters that have stood for millennia to the inquisitors who thought they knew every secret the galaxy held, everyone is asking the same thing. Are we failing? Not failing as a civilization, not failing to hold back the enemies at our gates, but failing in the one task that matters, failing to be the lock. The signs are everywhere once you know what to look for. The great rift that tore the galaxy in half wasn't just chaos growing stronger, it was reality growing thinner. The increased demon incursions, the worlds that simply vanish from all records, the reports of time moving incorrectly in certain sectors, space folding in ways that violate every law of physics. These aren't separate phenomena, they're symptoms. Symptoms of a seal that's corroding, of a prison door that's beginning to open, of something on the other side pressing harder and harder against the barrier that we, unknowingly, have always been. In the deepest vaults of the Inquisition, a senior Ordos Malleus agent named Covenant sits alone in a chamber lit by a single flickering candle. Before her lies a stack of reports, each one marked with the highest classification seal Omega Black, reserved for information so dangerous that even knowing it exists can warrant execution. She's been reading for 6 days straight, sustained by stimulants that would kill a normal human, her augmetic eyes scanning pages faster than thought. And with each page, her hands shake a little more. The reports span 10,000 years. They describe incidents, anomalies, events that were classified and forgotten, buried so deep that even the Inquisition itself forgot they existed until she started digging. A pattern emerges. Every 1,000 years, like clockwork, there's a surge. Reality becomes unstable in multiple locations simultaneously. Demon incursions spike exponentially. Navigators report the warp becoming almost impossible to traverse. Astropaths scream about something pushing against the barriers between dimensions. And then, just as suddenly, it stabilizes. The surges subside. Reality firms up again. The Imperium breathes easier and forgets it ever happened. Covenant lays out the dates on a timeline. The pattern is undeniable. 1,000 years, 2,000, 3,000. Each surge lasting longer than the last, each recovery period shorter. The Great Rift, she realizes with ice flooding her veins, wasn't an anomaly. It was the latest surge. And according to the pattern, according to 10 millennia of hidden data, they should have recovered by now. Reality should have stabilized. The warp should have calmed. It hasn't. If anything, it's getting worse. The surges used to last months. This one has been going for over a century. The recovery isn't coming. The pattern has broken. The lock is failing not gradually, not over millennia, but right now. In their lifetime, in this moment. She writes a single recommendation and seals it with her personal cipher. Activate the Terminus Decree. We are out of time. But on Terra, in the sanctum beneath the Imperial Palace, the Custodian General reads her message and does something he's never done in 300 years of continuous vigil. He laughs, not with humor. The sound is hollow, bitter, tinged with something that might be despair if custodians were capable of such weakness. He burns the message, scatters the ashes, and returns to his post before the Golden Throne. Because he knows something Covenant doesn't. The Terminus Decree can't be activated. Not won't be, can't be. The seal that protects it isn't meant to keep people out. It's meant to keep the decree from activating itself. Because the Terminus Decree isn't a set of instructions or a weapon or a protocol. It's alive. It's conscious. And it's been waiting 10,000 years for the conditions to be right, for the moment when the Emperor's plan reaches its culmination or its catastrophic failure. The seal will open when it's time and not a moment before, regardless of what any living being wants or needs. The custodians know this. They've always known. Their eternal vigil isn't about following orders, it's about bearing witness. When the decree activates, when the seal finally breaks, they need to be there to see what happens. To remember it, if remembering is even possible afterward. They are the Emperor's last students, and the lesson he's teaching spans 10,000 years of suffering, and will be delivered in a single reality-shattering instant. Meanwhile, in the stratagem of a battle barge that prowls the edge of Imperium Nihilus, a Space Marine chapter master named Theron stares at a hololithic display that makes no sense. His chapter, the Void Wardens, has been tracking what they thought was a Chaos fleet. But the fleet doesn't behave like Chaos. It doesn't raid, doesn't corrupt, doesn't follow any strategic logic he understands. It just moves through space, seemingly at random. But when his tech marines analyze the pattern, they find something impossible. The fleet is tracing a shape. In three-dimensional space, across light years, over the course of decades, it's been drawing a geometric pattern so vast that only by collating centuries of movement data could they even perceive it. And the pattern is nearly complete. Just one more edge, one more vector, and whatever shape they're creating will be finished. Theron orders his fleet to intercept, to stop them from completing the final segment. As his ships close in, weapons primed, he receives a transmission. Not from the enemy fleet, but from his own flagship's navigator, who shouldn't be broadcasting on tactical channels, who should be sealed in her chamber, guiding their warp transit. Her voice is wrong. Layered, harmonic, as if multiple people are speaking through her mouth simultaneously. Brother Captain, you must not interfere. The shape is necessary. The shape is the final seal. We've been building it for so long, across so many iterations, and this is the last one. This is the one that locks properly. Please, in the name of everything that lives, let us finish. He doesn't understand. The voice is using words he comprehends, but arranging them in ways that bypass meaning and speak directly to some deeper, older part of his consciousness. His hand hovers over the firing authorization. His chaplain is shouting about demonic corruption, demanding they destroy the navigator immediately. His tech marine is screaming that the geometry is wrong, that the shape they're tracing exists in more than 3 dimensions, that completing it could create a cascade effect through local space-time. But Theron hesitates, because beneath the wrongness, beneath the impossible harmonics of the navigator's voice, he recognizes something. Pain. Desperate, aching pain. The sound of someone who's been suffering for so long, they've forgotten what relief feels like, begging for just one chance to make it stop. He gives the order to hold fire. His chaplain's protests die as Theron explains nothing, can explain nothing, because he doesn't understand his own decision. He just knows, with the certainty that comes from 300 years of warfare, that stopping them would be wrong. That whatever the enemy fleet is doing, it's not an attack. The last vector completes, the shape closes, and for exactly 3 seconds, nothing happens. Then reality spasms. Every ship, loyalist and enemy alike, is thrown out of the warp like toys cast aside by a petulant child. Theron's vision splits, showing him the same moment from multiple angles simultaneously. He sees himself on the command deck. He sees himself from outside the ship. He sees himself from perspectives that don't exist, viewing spaces that can't be real. His mind begins to fracture under the strain, and then, silence. Perfect, absolute silence. Even the ever-present hum of the ship's systems is gone, even his own heartbeat. And in that silence, he hears it, the breathing. The same breathing the custodians have reported hearing in the depths of the webway. Slow, measured, patient. The sound of something ancient testing its bonds, finding them just a little bit looser, settling back to wait a little longer because soon, very soon, it will be free. When his senses return to normal, when he can see and hear properly again, the enemy fleet is gone. Not destroyed, simply absent, as if it had never existed. His navigator is dead, her body crystallized into something that looks like glass, but cuts reality itself when they try to move it. And on every surface of the ship, appearing simultaneously across tens of thousands of square meters, written in letters that glow with their own internal light, is a message. Thank you, we bought another century, maybe 2. But the debt always comes due, and we've been borrowing for 60 million years. Tell them to prepare. Tell them the weapons won't work because they were never meant to. We are the ammunition, not the gun. And we've already been fired into a target we can't see, can't understand, can't even confirm exists, but it's there. It was always there, waiting at the end of everything, patient as entropy, certain as death. The Emperor knew. He always knew. This is why he became what he became, not to rule us, but to guide us through the dark, to keep us moving forward even though forward leads to nowhere good. Keep fighting, keep suffering, keep being the thing we made you to be. Because the alternative is so much worse. Theron orders the message documented, encrypted, and sent to Terra. He watches it transmit, watches the confirmation that it's been received by the highest authorities. Then he orders every surface of his ship scrubbed, every trace of the message removed. His crew obeys, but they're all thinking the same thing. They're all asking themselves the same question that Theron can see written in their eyes, that he feels burning in his own mind. If we're the ammunition, what happens when we run out? Across the Imperium, in 1,000 different locations, other chapter masters, inquisitors, and leaders are receiving similar messages, experiencing similar events. The pattern is accelerating. The seal is failing not in one place, but everywhere, all at once, as if whatever they've been holding back has finally learned the shape of its prison, and is now pushing against every weak point simultaneously. And on Terra, in the sanctum sanctorum of the Imperial Palace, something unprecedented happens. The Emperor speaks. Not through visions, not through the faint psychic whispers that his chosen occasionally receive, but actually speaks. His withered mouth moves. His ancient lungs pull air that hasn't moved in 10,000 years. The sound that emerges is like a collapsing star, like the death of hope, like love twisted into something sharp enough to wound reality. He says, "Forgive me. I thought we had more time. The custodians surrounding the throne don't react. They can't. They're frozen, locked in place by whatever force the Emperor has just exerted to pull himself back into consciousness for this single moment. He's moving now, or trying to, the withered corpse that houses his mind shifting infinitesimally against its restraints. Around him, the mechanisms of the Golden Throne shriek in protest, alarms blaring as systems that haven't activated in millennia suddenly surge with power. And beneath the palace, in that sealed vault that exists in 5 dimensions simultaneously, the Terminus Decree begins to glow. The glow spreads like infection through sacred stone. The custodians feel it before they see it, a warmth that shouldn't exist in these cold depths, radiating upward through kilometers of bedrock and ceramite and ancient bones. The seals aren't breaking. They're dissolving, melting away like morning frost under a sun that has finally, inevitably, risen. And with the dissolution comes understanding, terrible and complete, flooding into every mind that's ever sworn an oath to the throne, every soul that's ever prayed to the Emperor, every human being across 1,000,000 worlds who's ever wondered what purpose could possibly justify 10,000 years of suffering. The Terminus Decree opens itself. Not violently, not dramatically, but with the quiet certainty of a flower blooming at its appointed time. The parchment inside doesn't need to be read. The words bypass eyes entirely, burning themselves directly into consciousness. 3 simple lines. 3 sentences that reconfigure everything humanity thought it knew about its own existence. You were made to endure. Endurance generates the energy that maintains the seal. When you can endure no more, you become the final seal itself. That's all. No elaborate instructions, no weapon to deploy, no secret technology to activate. Just a statement of fact delivered across 10 millennia, preserved by the Emperor's own blood, waiting for the moment when the truth could no longer be avoided. The realization cascades through the Imperium like a psychic scream. Every astropath feels it simultaneously. Every navigator sees it reflected in the currents of the warp. Every space marine bred from the Emperor's own genetic template understands it in his marrow. The Imperium of man isn't a civilization that's been fighting to survive. It's a machine designed to generate suffering. Not random suffering, not meaningless cruelty, but suffering of a very specific type. The suffering of endurance. Of holding on when every logical calculation says to let go. Of fighting when there's no hope of victory. Of believing in something greater, even when that something offers no comfort, no reward, no guarantee of anything except more pain. And that suffering, that absolutely human capacity to endure the unendurable, creates something, a psychic resonance, an energy that exists between hope and despair, between faith and nihilism. The warp responds to emotion, everyone knows this. Joy feeds Slanesh, rage feeds Korn, despair feeds Nurgle, ambition feeds Tzeentch, but endurance? Pure, stubborn, bloody-minded refusal to surrender? That feeds nothing. Or rather, it feeds something else entirely. Something older than the Chaos Gods. Something that exists in the spaces between their domains, in the gaps where even they cannot reach. It feeds the seal, the prison, the cosmic lock that's been holding something back since before the war in heaven, since before the old ones walked the galaxy, since perhaps before the galaxy itself existed in its current form. The Emperor didn't create this lock, he discovered it. Found it failing, found reality beginning to crack around the edges, found something massive and patient and utterly alien beginning to leak through. And he made a choice. A terrible, beautiful, monstrous choice. He made humanity into the lock's fuel. Took a species already modified by Dark Age scientists to be aggressive and survivable, and pushed those modifications further. Created the Imperium not as a government, but as an engine of endurance. Made everything brutal enough, oppressive enough, hopeless enough that every single human life would be an act of defiance against entropy itself. Billions born into suffering, raised in suffering, dying in suffering, and through it all, enduring. creating an endless stream of psychic energy that the Chaos Gods couldn't corrupt because it wasn't based on emotion they could feed on. It was based on the one thing that makes humans unique in all the galaxy: our capacity to keep going even when we shouldn't. The Space Marines understand it first. They were built for this, literally crafted to embody endurance made flesh. Every modification to their bodies, every psychological conditioning, every drop of the Emperor's own genetic material, it was all designed to create living batteries of this specific energy. They don't fight to win, they fight to continue fighting. That's why there are only 1 million of them across the entire Imperium, when the Emperor could have made billions. Quality over quantity. Each one a nuclear reactor of endurance, burning brighter than 1 billion normal humans. And the Emperor himself? He's the dam. The focal point where all that energy converges, channeled through the Golden Throne, directed into the webway, into those sealed sections where reality has been twisted and bound around something that must never be released. He's been doing this for 10,000 years, not dying but not living, existing in the space between to serve as the conduit for humanity's collective suffering. Every psyker sacrificed to the throne doesn't just sustain his body, their deaths, their final moments of endurance as they face oblivion, create a burst of exactly the energy needed to reinforce the seal. It's horrific, it's perfect. It's the most elaborately cruel system ever devised. And it's been failing anyway. Because endurance has limits. Even humanity's legendary stubbornness has a breaking point. The Emperor calculated that we could last 10,000 years, maybe 12, before the cumulative weight of suffering would finally crack the collective human psyche, before we'd stop enduring and start surrendering, before we'd choose annihilation over one more day of pain. He gave us the Imperium harsh and brutal and oppressive, because comfortable people don't endure, they merely exist. He gave us enemies on all sides, gave us a galaxy that wants us dead, because pressure creates the conditions for true endurance. But even he couldn't account for everything. The Great Rift changed the equation. When Cadia fell, when the pylons failed and the warp spilled across the galaxy, it didn't just divide the Imperium territorially. It divided it psychologically. Half the human race now lives in literal hell, where the laws of reality are negotiable, where demons walk openly, where hope isn't just scarce, it's actively punished. Those humans are enduring, yes, but their endurance is mixed with too much despair, too much exposure to the warp's influence. The energy they generate is corrupted, unstable. The seal is failing, not quickly, but inevitably. The Emperor's calculations are breaking down. Humanity has maybe 2 centuries left, maybe less. And when the seal finally fails completely, when the prison door opens, the custodian general sees it in his mind, the Emperor's last gift to those who've guarded him longest. A vision of what's been contained. Not a demon, not a god, not anything the galaxy has ever encountered. It's older than matter, older than energy. It's what existed before existence, and it wants that state back. The universe is an aberration to it, a mistake, a wrong equation that needs correcting. It doesn't hate. Hatred requires consciousness of the other. This thing simply is, and in its isness, everything else cannot be. The old ones sealed it away using the webway itself as a cage, bending dimensions around it, creating a pocket of unreality to contain pure unreality. They died to do it, poured their entire civilization into the working, and it still nearly wasn't enough. The Necrons helped at the end, in that brief moment when their war with the old ones was eclipsed by the realization that if they didn't work together, there would be nothing left to fight over. That's what ended the war in heaven. Not exhaustion, not mutual destruction, but a temporary alliance against something worse. They won. They sealed it away. And then both races collapsed from the effort, the old ones fading into extinction, the Necrons entering their long sleep. They left the seal in place, believed it would hold forever, couldn't imagine that anything could weaken it. They didn't account for Magnus. When he shattered the webway, when he broke the Emperor's work, He didn't just ruin humanity's future. He cracked the prison, created a flaw in the seal. And through that flaw, across 10,000 years, the pressure has been building. The Emperor has been using humanity's endurance to patch the crack, to reinforce the weakening portions, to buy time. But it's like trying to hold back an ocean with a wall made of pain. Eventually, the wall will fail. Not because it wasn't strong enough, because the ocean is infinite and the wall, however strong, is finite. Reboot Guilliman stands in the Sanctum Sanctorum, returned to consciousness by the Emperor's final burst of power. He remembers their conversation now, the one the Emperor had with him through the psychic gestalt, the truth hidden beneath layers of diplomacy and political necessity. He understands why his father seemed so cold, so distant, so utterly inhuman. Because the Emperor stopped being human 10,000 years ago. He became something else, a function, a process, a living equation solving a problem that has no solution, only delay. How long? Guilliman asks the empty air, knowing his father can hear, even now, even while channeling the psychic might of a billion souls. The answer comes not in words, but in images. 2 centuries. Maybe 3 if the Great Rift can be pushed back, if enough of humanity can be brought back from the edge of despair. Time enough for what needs to happen. Time enough for the Primarch to prepare the Imperium for its final purpose. Because the Terminus Decree has a second page. The custodians are seeing it now, reading it together, understanding the Emperor's final gambit. When endurance is no longer enough to maintain the seal, when humanity finally reaches its breaking point, there's one last option. One final act of defiance that might hold the prison closed permanently. Humanity doesn't retreat, doesn't scatter to the edges of the galaxy hoping to hide. Instead, we collapse inward. Every world, every ship, every living human being, all moving toward Terra, all converging on the throne world. And when we're gathered, when every soul is as close as physically possible, the Emperor releases his hold on the Golden Throne. Stops being the dam, stops channeling the energy. And instead, he does what he always planned to do from the moment he first saw the failing seal. He opens the door fully, lets the prisoner out, and meets it not with weapons or with power, but with 10 billion human souls, all enduring their final moment together. The pressure of that collective experience, focused through the Emperor's own consciousness, directed by 10,000 years of preparation, becomes not a seal but a transformation. The prisoner doesn't escape, it's forced to endure. To experience what humanity has experienced. To understand suffering and stubbornness, and the refusal to accept that anything is inevitable. It's a gamble, it might not work. The prisoner might simply annihilate everything, might prove too alien for even this desperate strategy to effect, but it's the only option left. The Emperor saw this future when he first sat upon the Golden Throne, saw the narrow path through probability that might lead to survival. And he's been guiding humanity along that path ever since, through war and suffering and loss, turning us into exactly the weapon we needed to be. Not a weapon that destroys, a weapon that endures. That shows something older than existence itself, what it means to choose existence, to fight for it, to suffer for it, to refuse its inevitability with every fiber of our being. Guilliman feels tears on his face. He hasn't wept since before his first death, since before the Emperor's light brought him back. But he weeps now, understanding the enormity of what his father has done, the weight he's carried alone for 10,000 years. Understanding that every cruelty, every hardship, every senseless death that has characterized the Imperium was necessary. Not because the Emperor was cruel, but because he was preparing humanity for the single most important moment in the history of the universe. 2 centuries, that's how long they have to prepare. To gather, to make ready for the day when the Emperor calls every human home. When we stop fighting the galaxy and turn inward, becoming not an empire but an offering. The final seal made of human will, human suffering, human endurance concentrated to a point so dense that even unreality itself, cannot escape its gravity. The custodian general sheathes his guardian spear. His watch is nearly over. Soon, there will be nothing left to guard. Only a choice to make. To stand with his emperor at the end of everything, or to take the final duty assigned to the custodians and scatter into the galaxy, carrying the memory of humanity forward in case the gambit fails, so that someone, somewhere will remember that we tried. He chooses to stay. They all do. Every custodian, without discussion, without hesitation. Of course they stay. They were made to endure. And if their emperor is making his final stand, then they will stand with him. Not because duty demands it, because endurance is its own reward. And humanity has always been very, very good at enduring. The message goes out across the Imperium, not as a command, but as an invitation. Gilliman, standing before the assembled leaders of a fractured humanity, delivers it in a voice that carries the weight of revelation and the lightness of release. There is no panic in his words, no desperation, just clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when all deception has been stripped away and only truth remains. We have 2 centuries, he tells them. 2 centuries to live as we choose, to fight the battles we deem worth fighting, to save the worlds we can save, to say goodbye to the stars we've called home. And then, when the time comes, we come home. All of us, every ship, every soldier, every citizen. We return to Terra not to die, but to become what we were always meant to be. The final answer to a question asked before time had meaning. The reaction is not what anyone expects. There's no mass hysteria, no collapse of social order. Instead, something remarkable happens. Humanity, freed from the pretense that the Imperium's cruelty was purposeless, freed from the uncertainty of why they suffered, begins to endure more beautifully than ever before. Because suffering with meaning is different from suffering in the dark. The soldier on the wall doesn't fight differently knowing his sacrifice feeds the seal, but he fights with understanding. The mother raising children in a hive city doesn't love them less knowing their endurance serves a cosmic purpose, but she loves them with deeper intention. Wars continue. The galaxy doesn't become peaceful just because humanity knows its ultimate destination. The Tyranids still hunger. Chaos still corrupts. The Necrons still awaken. But there's a shift in how humans face these threats. Less desperation, more determination. We're not fighting to survive for anymore. We're fighting to make these 2 centuries matter. To live fully in the time we have left. To ensure that when we finally converge on Terra, when we offer ourselves as the final seal, we do so as a species that earned its right to exist. That proved, in the face of a universe that wanted us dead, that we chose life anyway. The irony isn't lost on the philosophers who begin to emerge in this twilight era of the Imperium. For 10,000 years, humanity has been told it fights for survival, for the continuation of the species, for the glory of the Emperor and the dream of a unified galaxy. But now, knowing they fight for an ending, knowing they're destined to collapse inward rather than expand outward, humans discover something profound. They fight better. They love harder. They create more beauty, more art, more meaning in these final centuries than they managed in the previous 100 combined. Because when you know the story ends, you pay attention to the middle, you savor it, you make it worthy of its conclusion. On a frontier world at the edge of the Great Rift, a tech priest named Lexus makes a discovery in an ancient data repository. It's a journal, written by one of the scientists from the Dark Age who first modified humanity's genetic code. The entry is dated to a time before Old Night, before everything fell apart, and it contains a passage that Lexus reads over and over, trying to understand if it's prophecy or coincidence. We've made them aggressive, yes. Stubborn beyond reason. Capable of enduring conditions that would break any other sentient species. But I wonder sometimes if we've done more than that. If, in our attempts to create survivors, we've accidentally created something else. Something that doesn't just survive, but insists on survival. That looks at entropy and says, not today. That faces the inevitable and chooses to believe in the impossible anyway. I don't know if this trait will save them or doom them, but I know it makes them human in a way nothing else could. And perhaps that's enough. Perhaps that's enough. Lexus sends the passage to the archives on Terra, where it's filed away with billions of other fragments of lost knowledge. But it circulates anyway, copied and shared, becoming something of an unofficial anthem for humanity's final centuries. A reminder that whatever they were made to be, they became something more in the becoming. The Chaos Gods watch all of this with something approaching confusion. They've spent 10,000 years trying to corrupt humanity, to turn them to worship and service. And now, with humanity openly accepting its own ending, the gods find their influence waning. Because chaos feeds on the struggle between desire and reality, on the gap between what is and what could be. But humanity is closing that gap. They know what will be. They're moving toward it willingly. There's no more struggle to corrupt, no more desperation to exploit. Just acceptance. Just endurance worn like a badge of honor rather than a burden to escape. Nurgle finds his plagues less effective. Why fear death when you know exactly when and how you'll die? Khorne discovers his rage less intoxicating. Why fight for bloodshed when you're fighting for something greater? Tzeentch's schemes unravel because humanity stops caring about ambition and power. What use is an empire you're destined to abandon? And Slaanesh, perhaps most frustrated of all, finds that humans suddenly interested in experiencing everything they can before the end approach pleasure with such intensity and presence that it transcends his ability to pervert it. The great game continues, but humanity has stepped out of it. Not by defeating the Chaos Gods, but by making themselves irrelevant to their interests. It's perhaps the most elegant victory the Imperium has ever achieved, winning by refusing to play. In the depths of the webway, the breathing continues, but it changes rhythm, becomes less like testing and more like curiosity. The prisoner, if it can be called that, seems to sense what's coming. The nature of its prison is changing. Where once there was only endurance maintaining the seal, now there's intention, purpose. The energy humanity generates begins to take on new qualities, anticipation, preparation, even something that might be mistaken for eagerness. The Emperor feels this shift. In his 10,000-year vigil, he's learned to read the subtleties of the seal like a blind man reading Braille. And what he senses now gives him something he hasn't felt since the day Horus struck him down: hope. Not certainty, he's far too wise for certainty. But hope, the possibility that his gambit might actually work. That humanity's final act might not just contain the prisoner, but transform it. Teach it. Show it that existence, for all its flaws and pain and temporary nature, is worth choosing. Across the galaxy, humans begin the long migration. Not immediately 2 centuries is still 2 centuries. There are battles to fight, worlds to defend, lives to live. But the trajectory has begun. Trade routes start to favor paths that lead toward Terra. Military campaigns position forces closer to the throne world. Families pack belongings they'll carry for generations, treasures and memories to bring home when the call finally comes. And in the quiet moments, in the spaces between battles and duties and survival, humans do something they haven't done in 10,000 years. They talk about the future with honesty. Parents tell children what will happen, not as a horror story but as a truth. We're going to end, yes. But we're going to end together, and we're going to end meaning something. We're going to look at the thing that says we shouldn't exist, and we're going to show it why we do anyway. The children, perhaps surprisingly, understand. They accept it with the clarity only children possess, unburdened by the existential dread that paralyzed their ancestors. We get 200 years, they ask. That's a long time. What should we do with it? And their parents, freed from the lie that suffering was random or purposeless, freed from the fear that their struggles meant nothing, answer with conviction. Everything. We do everything. We live so fully that when we finally come together, when we finally offer ourselves as the seal, we do it as a species that squeezed every drop of meaning from our time here. We endure not because we have to, but because we choose to. And that choice is what makes us human. In the final analysis, perhaps that was always the Emperor's greatest gift to humanity. Not the Space Marines or the Imperium, or even the sacrifice he made on the Golden Throne, but the brutal honesty of purpose, the removal of all comfortable illusions, the simple, terrible, beautiful truth that we matter because we choose to matter, that we endure because endurance itself is an act of creation, a way of asserting that consciousness and struggle and suffering and joy are worth experiencing, especially when they're temporary. The galaxy doesn't care about humanity's revelation. The Tyranids still come, the Orcs still fight, the ancient evils still scheme and corrupt and destroy. But humanity, for the first time in its history, moves through this chaos with something approaching grace. We're not pretending anymore. Not pretending we'll last forever, not pretending our suffering is accidental, not pretending the Emperor is a god who'll save us from reality. We're just enduring, consciously and willingly, creating meaning in the space between birth and ending. And maybe, when the 2 centuries pass and the call goes out, when every human begins the final journey to Terra, when we gather as one species for one purpose, maybe the prisoner that's been waiting since before existence will look at what we've become and understand something it never learned. In all its eons of being, that existence isn't a mistake to be corrected. That consciousness, however painful, is worth the cost. That choosing to endure, choosing to exist, choosing to matter despite everything that says you shouldn't, that's not weakness or delusion. That's the only thing that's ever really mattered at all. The weapons that can destroy reality? They're not in vaults or sealed chambers or guarded by ancient protocols. They never were. The real weapon has always been us. Not our capacity for destruction, but our capacity for stubborn, bloody-minded, absolutely human refusal to let reality have the final word. We look at a universe that says we shouldn't exist, and we say, "Watch us anyway." We face entropy itself, and we say, "Not today." We endure not because we're strong, but because we're human, and humanity has always been very, very good at choosing existence over oblivion. Even when oblivion might be easier. Even when the cost is suffering. Even when we know the story ends. Especially then. Because if you're going to end, you might as well end meaning something. You might as well show the universe what it means to be human. You might as well endure so beautifully, so defiantly, so absolutely that even something older than existence itself stops to watch and wonder and maybe, just maybe, choose to exist alongside you rather than erase you. That's the real power of humanity in Warhammer 40K. Not our weapons, not our Emperor, not even our endless capacity for war, just our refusal to surrender. Our insistence that meaning exists because we create it. Our ability to look at 2 centuries until extinction and say, "Good, let's make them count." And in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, that might be the closest thing to hope that anyone's ever going to find.